Previously on the 2020 NFL season review. We talked about the 2020 season of the Atlanta Falcons. From them losing key pieces on their roster, blowing leads, firing their coach and general manager, and blowing even more leads. Not to mention them getting the 4th pick in the draft and drafting tight end Kyle Pitts, and then a few weeks later trading away their star wide receiver Julio Jones. On this week's episode, we'll be talking about the 2020 season of the Cincinnati Bengals. Yo, what's going on everybody? Thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of my 2020 NFL season review. This week we'll be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. But before we get into this video, as always, make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at SportsWhatCasually to keep up with things I do outside of YouTube. And don't forget to like this video, share with a friend, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss when I drop another episode. And with all of that out the way, let's get into episode 5. One year removed from having the worst record in the league, not to mention tying their franchise worst season record of 2-14, the Bengals look to leave all of their troubles in the rearview mirror. It seemed feasible because they had the first overall pick in the 2020 draft, which they used to select Joe Burrow, the flashy and record-setting QB out of LSU. They also had high hopes for the second-year head coach, Zach Taylor, as the organization and fans all hope to see the Bengals back in the playoffs for the first time since 2015. But, of course, you're watching this episode, so you already know that this didn't go exactly to plan. So, let's get into it. To kick off the offseason, the Bengals franchise tagged their aging star wide receiver, AJ Green, to retain him for this season. In terms of signings, the Bengals used their cap space to give big money deals to DJ Reader, Trey Waynes, and Vonn Bell. It was really clear that they wanted to shore up their defense. However, it turns out that only one of these 3 players, Vonn Bell, would play more than 5 games for this season, as Reader and Waynes battled injuries. In terms of the 2020 draft, as we discussed earlier, they had the first overall pick and selected Joe Burrow. But their draft class was actually pretty good. They got really big contributions from their second round pick, wide receiver T. Higgins. Finally, to make room for Joe Burrow, the Bengals released their long-term quarterback, Andy Dalton. The Red Rifle was their starting quarterback since 2011 and made 3 Pro Bowls and 4 postseason appearances with the Bengals. I mean, he had no playoff wins, but 4 appearances is pretty nice. The Bengals had 2 players who opted out of the 2020 season, but if we're being real, they weren't really big losses. In terms of attendance, the Bengals didn't allow fans at their Week 1 home opener, but soon allowed fans to attend beginning in Week 4 versus the Jaguars. The first win of Joe Burrow's career would have to wait all the way until Week 4 versus the Jaguars. It's funny because he experienced his first tie in Week 3 before his first victory. I'm not sure how many times that's happened to a player before, but congrats. However, the season would soon take a turn for the worse. In Week 6, their starting running back and my fantasy savior, Joe Mixons, suffered a right foot injury and ended his campaign for a 3rd straight 1,000 rushing yard season. Then, the worst case scenario for the Bengals happened. In Week 11, their number 1 overall pick, Joe Burrow, tore his ACL and MCL in his left knee, and also suffered damage to his PCL and meniscus. It was a gruesome injury, especially for a player so early into his career. I hope that the both of them have a speedy recovery. So, with the rest of the season, the Bengals having to play backups at the QB and running back position, the team's offense fell way off. In Week 13, after a loss to the Dolphins, the Bengals were eliminated from playoff contention for the 5th season in a row. Also, in the middle of the season, the Bengals traded disgruntled edge rusher Carlos Dunlap to the Seattle Seahawks. Thanks for that, by the way. Now let's look at the stats for the Bengals this season. When you look at their offense overall, dead last. It's kind of rough. But it's what you expect from a team that did play with their starting quarterback and starting running back for the majority of the season. 29 points and total yards. Nothing really stands out on this offense as they really struggle without their two main key players. If you look at their overall defense now, 21st in the league, not too bad. 22nd in points. And they did give up a lot of yards, especially on the ground, 29th in the league. But they were top 10 in rushing touchdowns allowed, which shows, maybe they got their act together in the red zone in terms of rushing defense. You love to see it. But this team did kind of struggle to get turnovers, especially interceptions, and they really did struggle bringing down quarterbacks for sacks, getting pressures. But I think with a lot of their pass rushers aging, I could understand the struggles. So, overall a alright showing from their defense this season. When you look at their advanced stats on offense, however, as you can see, it was very hard for them to convert, almost dead last in first downs and third down conversion percentage. But they were top 5 in fourth down conversion percentage. So I guess when this team's backs against the wall, they could really convert. So good on them. But as you can see, when they got to the red zone, they struggled to punch it in for 6. So it's just a lot of struggles on the offense, as we could tell. When you look at their advanced stats on defense, they blitzed the 15th most, but dead last in hurries, almost dead last in pressure percentage. As you can see, a lot of the aging pass rushers on their team, slowing down, it was a real struggle to get to the quarterback. So it just wasn't a alright season in terms of their defensive line. Now onto some brighter things as I talk about this team's offensive and defensive MVPs. Starting on the offensive side, where I'm going to give it to rookie wide receiver T. Higgins. This rookie wideout managed to be the quarterback's favorite target on a team with AJ Green and Tyler Boyd. That's no easy feat. His 67 catches ties Chris Collinsworth for Bengals franchise rookie record, and he was third amongst rookies in receiving yards. Now for the defensive MVP, I'm going to give it to their safety Jesse Bates. This third-year safety had his breakout season as he really stood out in their secondary. He greatly improved his pass coverage, posting career highs in completion percentage and passer rating allowed. Not to mention he set career highs in passes defended, solo tackles, QB hits, and tackles for loss. The Bengals came into the offseason with a projected $42 million in cap space. They were also able to roll over almost $11 million from last season's cap. In free agency, the Bengals lost a lot of key players: Carl Lawson, William Jackson, and wide receiver AJ Green. They also released longtime backup running back Giovanni Bernard and aging star defensive tackle Geno Atkins. In terms of signings, the Bengals used their cap space to give big money deals to Trey Hendrickson, Mike Hilton, and Chidobe Awuzie. I could be butchering that name, so I do apologize. Let's hope they get good contributions from all three of those guys, not to mention defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi. When it comes to the 2021 NFL Draft, the Bengals came in with the 5th overall pick. Many mock drafts, analysts, and even myself, a random guy on YouTube, thought that the Bengals were going to select offensive tackle Penei Sewell out of Oregon. Sewell was the best offensive tackle available in this draft, and the pick just made sense. Burrow got hit a lot this season, and he got injured being hit. So, you want to protect your quarterback so he doesn't get hit as much, so he won't get injured. It just makes sense. But the Bengals used that pick to select Joe Burrow's college teammate and arguably the best wide receiver in this class, Jamar Chase out of LSU. Now, Chase is going to be a certified baller, don't get me wrong, but I didn't really like the pick. You need to protect Burrow, especially since he's coming back from a gruesome knee injury. So I thought that Sewell was the right move. But oh well, what you would do? They did, however, address the offensive line in the second round by picking Jackson Carman out of Clemson. So at least they addressed it. So the Bengals are coming into the 2021 season with practically a new regime. A lot of the guys who've been there for years have gone. I'm especially worried about their defensive line. No Lawson, no Dunlap, no Atkins, and it was one of the weakest points in the defense last season. So without these guys, I do think that's going to be the weak point of the team. But I do think that the secondary is greatly improved, especially if Bates takes another step, and their free agency additions, I think they'll be alright in that category. Alright, so best case scenario, if Burrow and Mixon come back and they play great. I still do have a lot of doubts about this team. They're very young. Their head coach, I think he might be on the hot seat if he has another bad season. And not to mention, they're in one of the toughest divisions in football right now. The Ravens, the Steelers, and the Browns all made the playoffs last season. The Ravens still have probably the most terrifying running attack in the entire league. The Steelers, okay, Big Ben is getting up there in age and not as effective, but they still have a great defense. And the Browns, well, the Browns is the Browns. So I really do think they're on the outside looking in terms of playoff contention this season. But, Burrow and Mixon come back, they play good. You have weapons with Chase, an improved secondary, and if the defensive line doesn't fall off, I could see this team going like what? 5-11. Yep. Alright guys, that was episode 5, the Cincinnati Bengals covered. Next week we get into episode 6. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss when that drops. And why don't you turn on notifications one time? And also, while you're there, why don't you watch the rest of the episodes? What are you waiting on? Anyway guys, until next week, y'all take care and be safe. Later.